Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to this week's episode of the Flower Lounge. This is going to be such a fun episode. We've got a gentleman here who is just as excited about mushrooms as I am about flowers. Jeff Chilton was raised in the Pacific Northwest. He studied ethno-mycology at the University of Washington in the late 60s. And in 1973, he started work on a commercial mushroom farm in Olympia, Washington. Over the next 10 years, he became the production manager responsible for the cultivation of over 2 million pounds of Agaricus mushrooms per year. He was also involved in the research and development of Shiitake, Oyster and Enoki mushrooms, which resulted in the earliest U.S. fresh Shiitake sales in 1978. I love that. Jeff is a founding member of the World Society for Mushroom Biology and Mushroom Products in 1994 and a member of the International Society for Mushroom Science. Mr. Chilton's company was the first to offer a complete line of certified organic mushroom extracts to the U.S. nutritional supplement industry. Nammex extracts are used by many supplement companies, noted for their high quality, based on scientific analysis of the active compounds. This is a guy who knows everything about mushrooms. Thank you, Jeff, for being with us.
I'm very happy and delighted to be here with you today. Yeah, this is great, Katie. Thank you.
So we start out every episode with a little exercise. If you want to close your eyes, getting comfortable in your seat, and then going back to a time in your childhood when you played around flowers or plants or trees or mushrooms. And just thinking about what you were doing, who you were with, and see if you can identify a favorite flower or botanical or mycelium. We'll throw that in there for you. And once you've identified your favorite, reflect on the 3 words you would use to describe its personality. And when you're pretty clear on that, you can open your eyes and share with us what you thought of, what you were up to, and what your words are.
Well, we have a lot of rhododendrons here in Washington State and in this part of the world, and I can look back and remember seeing them around me and being in my environment since I was very young. And they're a beautiful, beautiful plant, and they have so many branches and so many flowers. And I would say they are sort of multidimensional in that it's like there's many flowers on that one particular place where they come off. So I see it just kind of as a all-encompassing, beautiful, warm, and very colorful part of my world in that sense.
Wow. Yeah, they are stunning.
And they're in so many varieties. And what's interesting about rhododendrons too is that we actually have wild rhododendrons here in the Pacific Northwest. And so sometimes when I've been hiking up in the mountains during the summertime, I'll actually come across wild rhododendrons and imagine that.
Wow. Oh, I have to come and make a flower. Come and visit. Let's get the team up, the crew up to come.
Yeah.
Last year, I was in the botanical garden in Vancouver, and I was amazed at how many colors and varieties there are of rhododendron. And I bet you didn't know this. We made a flower essence of one of the pink rhododendron flowers, and its main superpower is compassion.
Oh my goodness.
So
I love that.
It's kind of fitting because we typically also say that how you describe your childhood favorite is how you bring your greatest gifts to the world. So we could describe you as multidimensional, all-encompassing, beautiful, warm, and colorful. Does that resonate?
Oh, that resonates. Yes, absolutely. And I love the word compassion because it's so important. We all need to have compassion for other things, for all the things around us,
Right.
the plants, the animals. I mean, that is just crucial. Specifically, there's a book out there called Island
Mm-hmm.
by Aldous Huxley. I
Okay.
don't know if you're familiar with the book, but in this book, Island was a very special place. And in this book, he had birds, mynah birds, that flew around and they would say two different phrases. One was karuna,
Compassion, compassion.
compassion, and the other was here and now.
Oh, wow. I think that's what they're saying. I think that's what they're saying when they're singing. I believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. That is really interesting. They are saying here and now, and I, what, I actually from my window right here, I'm looking out at the forest around me, and I have crows that come down, and I love these birds. They're wonderful birds. They're gregarious. They have personality, and of course, I've been feeding them, and so they like me.
They have extra compassion for you.
They're my friends, and I love birds, and I love flowers. And I might have told you that recently in my travels, and I spend the winters in Patagonia,
Oh my God.
and I have come across amazing new flowers while I'm down there. I think I sent some of the photos of them to your team. And when I come across those, and I'm down there, and I'm mostly out on rivers because I'm fly fishing for trout. That's one of my passions.
Uh-huh.
And when I see some of these flowers, I stop and I just have to stare at them and just take in the beauty because the colors are rich,
Wow.
vibrant, and they're in this amazing riverside environment. And then I will oftentimes take a photo too because I'm like, I need to remember this moment.
Wow.
So I'm building a small library of
Wow.
flower photos.
Wow. It just feels like I mean, just like listening to you is like kind of like the sense of jaw-dropping beauty that just
You
stops
know what? And for me, that's just trying to bring more of this beauty into my life and realizing how important that is. And flowers, my goodness, when I was contacted by your team and when I looked at your website and I thought, oh my goodness, flowers and flower essences and Katie's of this flower woman, I just thought, man, that is so cool. I'm so stoked by that.
That's awesome. Well, we obviously felt the same about you and the whole world of mushrooms. Yeah,
Yeah.
so how did you get into the whole, I mean, from talking to you, you obviously have a really deep and profound appreciation connection to this beautiful paradise that we live in and are co-creating with. And you just earlier before we hit the record button, you were telling me about these 500 to 1,000-year-old trees that people would have to surround, many people would have to surround to get their arms around, which is just, I can't imagine the beauty of the place that you're living in right now. And how did you take that really profound appreciation for nature and get down into a level that most people don't see in terms of mushrooms and mycelium networks?
Well, interestingly enough, and I told you that I went to high school in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
and and while I was there, I had friends that would go down to Mexico City
Mm-hmm.
in the summertime to what was called University of the Americas. And oh, I wanted so bad to be one of those people, but I never was. And I studied Spanish in high school while I was there, which has served me very well on my trips to South America.
I
But
bet.
but one summer when I was in my junior year, my friend came back from Mexico and he said, oh my goodness, he said, while I was in Mexico, I actually encountered and consumed magic mushrooms. Now, You know what? I'm kind of a romantic. Believe it or not, the 50s, which is the era when I was a youngster, we had Walt Disney and all these stories, these amazing, whether it was Snow White or Cinderella or Treasure Island, or, I mean, it was a time of pirates and exploration. And so for me, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so amazing. This is so interesting. And when we moved back, right after high school, we moved back to Seattle, where I grew up.
Yeah.
And I went to the university there. And for some reason, that stayed with me. And I studied anthropology because I was so interested in how other cultures operated, how they organized themselves, and my interest in mushrooms was there as well. And I found out that a lot of cultures had used mushrooms going back thousands of years.
Right.
A lot of them in shamanic healing, and so that became my field of study.
Mm-hmm.
I studied ethnopharmacology or ethno-mycology, which was the use of mushrooms in indigenous cultures. And part of that, too, oriented me to Mexico, which was because it was still, this was the interesting part about it, it was still being practiced in Mexico. And this was just discovered in the 50s. And a man went down there. He went down there 5 summers. He wrote about it. That was part of my studies. And so that was kind of where it all originated for me. And it's hard for me to really say, Katie, exactly why, other than, I mean, let's face it, the 60s was also a time of great change. And we were expanding our consciousness and expanding our horizons.
Right. Right.
So when I graduated from university, well, not many people employ people with anthropology degrees.
Right.
And so I went to my mycology professor, and I said, Dr. Stentz, I'm really interested in growing mushrooms. And he actually was a mentor, and he taught me mushroom culture and things like this on the side. And he said, well, there's this mushroom farm 60 miles down the road in Olympia, Washington. Go down and talk to them, and maybe you'll get a job down there. I went down, I interviewed. A couple of days later, I got the phone call. I was hired, and I was just like ecstatic.
Wow.
Ecstatic. And I moved down to Olympia. I spent the next 10 years there. And I literally lived with mushrooms
Wow.
for 10 years. And
Wow.
and here's kind of how it works is mushrooms, especially in North America, are grown inside in houses and climate controlled big rooms. And on this farm, we're large enough that every week we put in 4 new crops because they have a 90-day cropping cycle. So 4 crops go in, 4 crops are finished and go out.
Super prolific, eh?
Well, and think about this for a second. 4 crops a week times 50, I'm seeing 200 crops per year.
Wow.
After 10 years, I've seen 2,000 crops. A farmer.
How many mushrooms in a crop?
The yield of each crop would be somewhere around 20,000 pounds.
Holy moly.
20,000 pounds per crop. And so a normal farmer would be seeing 50 crops a year in his lifetime or her lifetime. I was seeing 2,000 crops. I was seeing 200 crops a year.
Wow.
So I mean, when you talk about being close to something and seeing these things growing, 4 different rooms, different crops every week. So as I was going around the farm as the head grower and ultimately the production manager, I was going in and out of these houses, multiple houses every single day, looking at these mushrooms in every stage of development.
Wow.
And you start out growing mushrooms by this. The seed growing a mushroom is actually live mycelium. And for your listeners who don't know how this organism works, no seeds, they have spores. These spores will germinate. Each germination will be a fine filament called a hypha. When those filaments come together, they form a network. That network is called mycelium.
Okay. Let's just stop right there because I get really excited about this. I wrote about some of that in my book about the internet-like qualities of the mycelium network and how there can be, that one cell layer of mycelium under the surface of the dirt and how they're like communicating things to each other. Is there anything you can share about that?
Well, yes, I can share a couple things. First of all, for example, the mycelial network, and out in nature, the mycelial network will be hidden for the most part. It's underground in the soil. It's in a piece of wood, and it will communicate. I mean, it has its own, let's just say, body. So these mycelial bodies will be out there, multiple hundreds, thousands of them, because there's thousands of different species.
Right.
Now, a couple things you do have to remember. These species, can they communicate with each other? Well, for one, they can't mate. So when they bump up against each other, they stop. They can't go anywhere. So it's kind of like a plant. The roots of these plants don't come together and hybridize. I mean, unless they're very close or something like that. But the fact is that the mycelium is out there decomposing. That's its job. It's out there breaking down organic matter. Without that, we would be buried in tree litter and branches. But the way I look at it a little differently. I look at it as the mycelium is part of an ecosystem. It works with bacteria. There's multiple different types of fungi out there that are working together. The mushroom that we see, that's just one small part of this large kingdom of fungi. And there are lots of mycelial networks that don't produce a mushroom. They don't produce any kind of a fruiting body at all. Communication, you know what? I really feel that organisms on this planet are in constant communication with each other. I think the trees, I was actually just listening last night to a man named Rupert Sheldrake. He talks about morphic resonance. And this is a quality out there that it's hard to measure, but he says it's there, just like we can't see waves out there, radio waves, or all of these magnetic waves. We don't see those. They're there.
We don't see what's coming off of our cell phone, but we know that it's got to reach the tower somewhere, right? In order
Exactly. So I look at the this fungal organism that has a fruiting body that we call a mushroom. I look at that as part of a much bigger organism, let's say. So, and in terms of the mycelium and mycelial networks, they are out there. Are they the Earth's internet? No, I don't really think so, but it's an interesting concept. Do they communicate, and how do they communicate? I don't know. I really don't know. Other than that mycelium, if it's out there in a large way, it's sending nutrients from all its parts to where those mushrooms are coming up, because the actual purpose of that mycelium, or the function, let's say, is amassing nutrients. When conditions are right, up comes the mushroom. And that's normally what we see, and we go, oh, a mushroom, look at that. And the other thing about mushrooms is, yes, you can be walking out there and never see them. Sometimes if it's big enough, you'll see it, but there's a lot of species that are small and ephemeral, and we don't necessarily see them. And especially we're busy and we're focusing on other plants, we will not necessarily see those mushrooms when they come up.
But can't they transmit information like similar to trees? Like how to protect themselves against certain pathogens or
Well, you know what?
is that a
I,
misnomer?
you know what? I kind of have a different viewpoint because I think, we can say, a lot of people view the world as things are attacking each other. Oh, somebody's attacking this mushroom and is trying to get at it and all that.
Sure.
And the same with plants. They'll say, oh, this plant, it produces this substance so that this, this particular thing can't eat it. And then they
Sure.
say, oh, yeah, it's sweet so that something will eat it.
Right.
I think those are human constructs. I really do. And so for me, it's producing these compounds. Why does a psilocybin mushroom produce psilocybin? So what? So that somebody will eat it and get high? I mean, you have to be very careful here when you're putting out these types of ideas because, for the most part, I personally believe they're more of a human construct, and a lot of it is that as humans, we constantly want to find a purpose for things. Why? Why is it doing this? Why does it produce this compound or that compound? You know
It's
what?
magic.
Well,
Magic.
it is. It is absolutely magic, and all we're doing is throwing our mental construct, the net that we have produced and that we have learned, because all of this is kind of what we've learned to do. So for me, I don't really see it. I see it more. You know how I see it, Katie? I see it as a dance.
I like that. I really like that. Let's talk about, well, do you want to tell me more about that dance? Or,
Well, let me just say this. I think it's a much more realistic, a much more natural way of looking at the world. Someone also expressed it as, I don't know if you've heard him lately. Have you listened to Jim Carrey lately?
not lately, no.
You should listen to him. Jim Carrey is now looking at the world in a totally different manner. He's not that comedian or actor. He's like had a profound experience. And he says, you know what? I'm looking out there right now. I see motion. And I thought, and he says, I'm just a part of all this. We're all just one big thing. And I'm looking out there. And I thought, yeah, that's what I see too. I see motion. I see beauty. I see things. We can use language to communicate certain ideas about that. That's what's language, but we have to be really careful. It's just like, I don't subscribe to this. We've got to fight this disease. We've got to fight this cancer. We've got to struggle against it.
Well,
I really do not like that.
There's a reason why it exists. It exists like as a teacher, right? And there's some piece of wisdom that we can unearth from working with whatever that is versus like what you're saying versus seeing it as this aggressive thing and it wants to take us over. It's happening in our own body, right? And our own bodies are full of wisdom.
Well, and I really think my whole model is that what we're trying to do is stay in balance.
Right.
We are trying to be in harmony. So really the way I look at it is I'm trying to do things for myself and my environment that maintain a harmonious relationship. That's for me, that's a much better paradigm, let's say. So all of this, I mean, which doesn't mean that we don't have struggles. Life is full of ups and downs and yin and yang, and there's struggles. But and maybe there's the occasion where we're in a fight. But look, let's not view the world as in that way, because no, we want to view it as we're cooperators. We're not competitors. We're just cooperating. We're trying to maintain this harmonious relationship that is out there and really is our birthright.
Speaking of cooperating, so when you lived with the mushrooms for 10 years and saw probably 50 million plus mushrooms come and go.
I did.
Just thinking in terms of like the wisdom of your lived experience around those mushrooms, what was it could be just like any kind of down to earth wisdom that you learned about mushrooms, wisdom from the mushrooms, wisdom that arose inside of you from working with the mushrooms. And what kind of mushrooms did you watch grow?
Well, to start out with that last part of it, we were growing Agaricus mushrooms on that farm. That was our main crop, which was the button mushroom. But we also had a Japanese scientist working with us there, and he was growing shiitake, he was growing oyster mushrooms, and he's growing enoki mushrooms. And I got to work with him, and I was exposed to these other other mushrooms there, and these were mushrooms that had been used and eaten for thousands of years in Asia. In fact, China is like the birthplace of mushroom cultivation, and a lot of it for me too was just this idea that, wow, I've been out there hunting mushrooms in nature, and I love that. It's such a wonderful thing. I don't know if you've been on a mushroom hunt, but it's like a treasure hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So we're out there, and we're walking through this beautiful forest.
Yeah.
And okay, some days it's raining on us, but some days it's sunny, but we're walking through this amazingly beautiful environment. If we find what we're looking for, it is like treasure. Oh my goodness, look what we found. And if it's in perfect condition, we can go, oh, okay, I'm going to take that back, and you're my meal for the night. And part of it too is it's like we're not damaging that organism because it springs forth from the mycelium that's under the ground. So we just gently pop that thing out. We leave the mycelium behind. We take that with us. And then later on, we thank the earth for giving us that wonderful food.
It's like picking apples off a tree, right?
It absolutely is. It is. And what could be finer than a fresh apple right off the tree? Oh my goodness. That is ecstasy for me.
Mm-hmm.
we're Washington State is known for its apples, and everywhere I go, if I see an apple tree, and if I happen to be there at harvest time, and if I go up and I hold that apple and just kind of give it a little bit of twist, and it comes off in my hand, I'm like, oh my God,
It's a miracle.
Amazing. and when you find an apple tree and you eat it and you're going like, oh my goodness, that tastes so good. You can buy an apple sometimes in the store and you bite into it and it's like mush, and you go, oh no, not another one. So that's what it was like for me with mushrooms. It was like going from walking through the woods, looking for these interesting organisms, to a point where now I'm actually able to be part of their life cycle, bringing them into cultivation and watching them go through every stage. From the first stage is you plant that mycelium in the substrate, which might be, in the case of Agaricus, a compost. With shiitake, it's a wood log, and you're watching that mycelium start to spread through that compost. And the compost goes from being sort of dark to, in 2 weeks, it is white with mycelium. It is beautiful to look at. And then with Agaricus, you cover it with a bit of peat moss. And then in another 2 weeks, the mycelium has gone up to the peat moss. It's on the top. It's forming little tiny, small little dots that ultimately turn into a carpet of mushrooms.
Wow, that must be amazing to see.
And when they're harvesting, the smell in that room,
wow,
like the shiitake farms that I visit, and I don't know if you eat shiitake.
I love shiitake mushroom.
Oh, shiitake mushroom.
So good. And you know what? Recently, I have just been actually so I'm really into Asian culture and Asian food. And so I've been eating them for years. But recently, I'm like craving them. Like I'll see them fresh because usually we use them dry, but I see them fresh in the store. And I'm just like,
oh,
every week I have to get them. What is like, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but
That's okay.
what is it in the shiitake mushroom that my body is craving so much?
Well, shiitake actually have a sulfur-based compound in them that gives them their flavor and aroma. And you know what they call shiitake mushrooms? The name for shiitake mushrooms in China is shanggu, and shanggu means fragrant mushroom.
I love that.
And shiitake mushrooms, they have a flavor and an odor that is just like, oh yes. And
Wow.
when I'm in China visiting mushroom farms, when I'm on a shiitake farm, the aroma in the air of those literally hundreds of thousands of shiitake mushrooms that are
Wow.
growing on that farm, the aroma in the air is so fragrant.
Wow.
It is so amazing to be there and experience that.
Wow. I studied botanical perfumery for a while, and one of one of those like really wild oils or extracts that you can work with in perfumery is mushroom. And I always thought that was so bizarre. And it didn't smell as good as what I think. Like, I think I need to go to one of these shiitake farms and smell what it smells like.
well, that's interesting because just to call it mushroom is odd to me because Katie, every
Which
mushroom
mushroom? Right.
has its own flavor and its own odor,
Right.
and that's the wonderful thing about it.
Yeah.
It's just like if we were to talk about the nutritional value of mushrooms. Well, every mushroom has a different profile.
Right.
Each
Right.
mushroom has a different amount. Each species different amount of protein, carbohydrates. There's a huge variation. It's kind of like saying, oh yeah, all plants. Here's the nutritional value of plants. It doesn't work that way. No. So yeah, I don't know what they were using to call it mushroom,
Some
but
kind of French mushroom, I'm sure. I don't
well,
know
you
what
know
the
what?
species was.
Well, okay, so maybe that's what it was because you know what they call the Agaricus mushroom that I was growing? They call it the champignon de Paris,
Oh,
the
interesting.
mushroom of Paris,
That must be
because
what it is.
that's actually where that champignon, that agaricus culture started in France.
Oh, interesting. Okay. No wonder. No
So
wonder.
that's where it all sort of was initiated, and I love the whole history of mushroom growing. 12th century in China, they learned how to grow shiitake mushrooms, and the stories that they have about the person that discovered it and how it's a beautiful story. His wife got ill for something and he learned that the shiitake mushroom could help her, and he went out to the forest and found the shiitake mushroom to bring her back to health. And then he decided that this mushroom was something he was going to learn how to grow so that he could bring the benefits to others. I mean, it's just fascinating to me, these types of stories and how certain plants, for example, come into cultivation. I mean, think about that for a minute. I mean, there's only maybe 20 or 24 different mushrooms that we can cultivate. There's thousands of species and we can only cultivate 24 of them. It's not easy to do. And think of all the plants that we can cultivate.
Right. Right. Right.
So anyway, yeah.
And so, what are some of the health benefits of? I know listeners are really interested in wellness and long life. What are some of the health benefits of shiitake mushrooms?
Well, before I get into that, let me just say this. If you
Sure.
go out on the internet and you look at some of the different mushrooms,
Yeah.
and there are places where it's like, oh yeah, this mushroom does everything in the world that you can possibly imagine. The one that they really do that with right now is chaga. Chaga is all of a
Chaga,
sudden the king of mushrooms, and
chaga, and
and
reishi,
there's
and
and there's nothing it can't do, and that literally drives me over the edge because it's like, okay, here's another panacea.
kind of a trendy thing. Huh?
Oh, and it is a trendy thing.
Not a holistic picture.
Well, and not only that, I mean, a lot of it is just what I call marketing speak.
Mm-hmm.
Here's something, and they try and say it does everything so they can sell more of it. I'm just like, please
Right.
stop it. This does not
Mushroom
help.
madness.
Yeah, this does not help anybody. You're just trying to make money. Don't do this to me.
Okay, so before we get into any of the health benefits, this is the caveat, right? Is like a range,
Absolutely
a
not.
variety.
Yes, be careful with what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
It has
think
to be
about
right
a
for your body,
minute.
right?
Well, that certainly. And here's the thing: mushrooms are what we call the premier adaptogen out there. Mushrooms are also something that is a food that is your medicine. And what mushrooms have that a lot of other plants or organisms do not have are what are called beta glucans. Beta glucans, there's been a tremendous amount of research on beta glucans that demonstrate they have this immunological activity. So that's where mushrooms and mushroom products have been tied to, let's say, cancer and things like this. And there's a couple of drugs that have actually been made in Japan and China that they've used as an adjuvant. So somebody's going through chemo or radiation, they give them this mushroom-based drug, and it just helps to maintain a stronger immune system. And the way I think people should look at mushrooms is that there's something that can help you in terms of prevention. And we need to look at
Right.
prevention as the basis of our health. And that's like diet,
Mm-hmm.
that is exercise, that's
Mm-hmm.
all those things that we know about. And mushrooms are a key part of that. And that's how we should do it. And so mushrooms have these beta glucans, and the beta glucans make up 50% of the cell wall of most mushrooms. So you can eat mushrooms and get those beta glucans. And when we sell them as supplements, what happens is that we will break those beta glucans out of the fiber a little bit, and we'll concentrate it down so that you can get those beta glucans in a little more concentrated form, in the sense of you'll have more of them in that, let's just say 500 milligram capsule or something like that, which is the way most supplements are sold. But I'm a firm believer that people should put mushrooms into their diet. Mushrooms are a
Yeah.
wonderful, wonderful food. And before you even begin to think about supplementation,
Right.
put them into your diet.
I was going to ask you about that because, in Asia, it seems to me, and I'm no expert, but it seems to me that it's so much more common in Asia that these, incredible superfoods are woven into our 3 squares a day or snacks or, and this whole sort of like seems to me like Western idea. And you can see that in any health food store. You can see it at the Natural Products Expo. Every year there'll be some, this year, one year it's like acai is like the savior ingredient. And the next year it's something else. And things have these like trendy, like you say,
Flavor of the month, right?
and I think it's, on one hand, I think it's great that we can deeply appreciate the gifts that Mother Nature has to offer us. I think that's a step in the right direction, just to see that, wow, we have this bounty here. We don't need to take a, pill made in a chem lab.
Yep.
But what's your feeling on, when to take a more concentrated version of it because you're not well versus incorporating it into your diet?
Well, my feeling is the first thing that you need to do is get it into your diet, because you know mushrooms are something that work in the background. They don't work overnight. So if you're going to supplement with them, you have to look at them as a more of a longer term basis. So rather than wait till you get ill, get them into your diet. Get them working for you right now as a food product. And you know what? You don't have. I eat mushrooms at least 3 or 4 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
If I go to the market, I'm buying mushrooms. Will be coming home with me, no question about it.
What kind of mushrooms? What kind of
well,
mushrooms are you eating?
well, in my small community, we don't have a great selection, but we do have fresh shiitake and fresh agaricus. And look, for those people out there that are elitists and they go, oh yeah, those button mushrooms, they're, bland, they're this, they're that. Look, I lived with those mushrooms. I love them. they're a delicious mushroom. People get kind of jaded, and if you talk to a wild mushroomer, especially, they're just like, yeah, Agaricus, forget about it. Agaricus also has medicinal benefits to it. It's a great mushroom. Here's one of the things I'll tell your listeners immediately: cook them properly, high heat.
Okay.
High heat. Slice them. Don't slice them too thin. Keep them, maybe a quarter of an inch thick anyway. And when I cook them well, I like to throw them in a hot pan. I cook them in butter if I'm cooking them alone. And I do that a lot of times. I just like to eat them as is. I'll put them in things as well, but I'll eat them as is. And then I brown them up on each side. I will make sure they're brown. So I'll cook them more than maybe most. And look, everybody's heard about, mushrooms are slimy, gross things. And I'm like, that's because you cook them improperly.
Right.
My mushrooms are not slimy. They're firm. If you cook them on a low heat, you're cooking them, and next thing you know, the water comes right out of them, and they're sitting in a pool of water that you've just cooked out of them. They are not appetizing.
The way you describe it sounds really yummy. High heat,
please,
brown
and then I'll sprinkle a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and it's just like, I could just sit there. And before they're even out of the pan, I'm just like, So please cook them properly, and you can put them into a stir fry. You can put them into eggs. That's the beauty of mushrooms. You can put them into almost anything. You can make soups out of them. If I make up a stew, I've got mushrooms going into my stew. I mean, make them part of your diet. They're a wonderful, wonderful food. Decent level of protein for a vegetable. High in carbohydrates. The carbohydrates that they've got are good carbohydrates, like the beta glucans, like what's called mannitol, which is a sugar that breaks down very slowly. So B vitamins, they also have B vitamins. The other thing that's really interesting, Katie, which is I just learned about recently, in the last 5 years or so, mushrooms have a compound in them called ergosterol. Ergosterol is similar to our cholesterol. It's the fungal sterol. Ergosterol is a precursor to vitamin D.
Oh my God, that's it. Because we all need more vitamin D, right?
It's a precursor to vitamin D. Now, remember, it's a precursor. So mushrooms themselves don't have much vitamin D. But when you expose that to sunlight, which I've heard you've got a lot of in Phoenix, Arizona.
And we try to avoid it. That's why we all have low vitamin D levels here.
Put those mushrooms, fresh mushrooms, even dried mushrooms, put them out in the sun for 15 or 20 minutes. That will raise up their vitamin D content to where you may be getting 100 to 200 IUs of vitamin D just from those mushrooms.
That is so interesting. Have you seen in any of the traditional cultures in cooking in Asia that they put them out in the sunlight?
Hey, listen to this. That's how they dry shiitake mushrooms in China.
Brilliant. And of course they knew. Of course they knew.
Well, and I'll send you a photo of a drying rack, and each mushroom is hand placed on that rack, and everyone has got its gills upturned and exposed, meaning more surface area to convert the ergosterol into vitamin D.
Wow.
And here's the horrible downside to that story. Okay, all of these countries, they want to be more Western, right? So what are they doing now? They're starting to put their shiitake into dryers.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Please don't do that. But yes, well, of course we're putting them to dryers because that's what they do in the West, and that's going to be more clean. And that's, and I'm like, oh my goodness. You go from growing these wonderful mushrooms naturally, and you grow them in greenhouses with fresh air. And what's really cool about it in China, they don't grow them in rooms like I was growing Agaricus. I'm growing them in big kind of like warehouse rooms, and we're going in there with miner's lights.
Oh my God, really?
Miner's lights, because for one, Agaricus doesn't need light to grow, and so why put on the lights in there? And when they don't need light, that's just a power waste. So you go in for Agaricus, and we all had miner's lights on to walk through these houses.
How bizarre.
They grow them all in greenhouses. They have ambient light. Mushrooms actually need light to grow properly. Agaricus is an anomaly. It doesn't need light. That's why they could grow them in caves and things, but most mushrooms need light. So they grow them over there naturally, and they grow them according to the season. So some mushrooms are growing in the summer, and they harvest them in September. Other mushrooms, they're growing in the fall, and they harvest them in November.
Of course.
Sometimes I've actually seen them where they will take these shiitake logs and they will place them in the rice paddy standing up after they've harvested the rice.
Wow.
I mean, it's like, this is how it's done naturally. And what could I say? Going from, for example, the farm I worked on, and here we are in the West, and everything is mechanized as much as possible, and it's all, spend as much money on a room with air conditioning and heating and fresh air. When over there, they're doing it in a greenhouse. They're growing the mushrooms when the temperatures in the ambient air is perfect for growing the mushrooms. And the yields, the efficiencies are so high. They're so good. It's amazing.
Well, and also too, you think about, the efficiencies are high during that season, and one may, the Western sort of mindset may argue like, well, you can get lots if you do it year round. But then people have to eat twice as much because they're eating it and it's not giving them the kind of nutrients that their body wants, right? So less actually becomes more.
Yeah. No, it's that's the one thing about it. And so, and we travel to China every year, and we actually grow all of our mushrooms in China.
Wow.
We grow them in China, and I've been organically certified since 1992.
Before it was cool.
I believe in it
Before
totally.
It was a thing.
In 1997, I took the largest organic certification body in the United States. I took them to China and did the very first workshop for organic certification of mushrooms in China, 1997.
So cool.
Yeah. Because I realized that if I was going to sell mushrooms as supplements, as herbal medicine, the economics, believe it or not, the economics are not there to do that in the United States. You can't do it because you can grow mushrooms and sell them fresh. But remember, supplements are all sold dry as a dry powder. So that $5 that I get for my, let's say, pound of Agaricus or Shiitake, I dry those out. I have to get $50 for that pound now. It doesn't work. So you can't grow mushrooms for supplements in the United States. What people do, then this is kind of the interesting thing, and which goes to a lot of the research I've done. They grow mycelium and they sell the mycelium, but they grow it on grain.
Oh no.
And at the end of the process, they do not remove the grain from the product. So yes. And so most of the products that are in the markets in the United States, if it says grown in the United States, what it is mostly starch from the grain that they grow that mycelium on.
Which we already get too much of, which is probably GMO.
And you know what? And I'm at trade shows. I have people coming up and they say, "Oh, wow, mushrooms! I love them so much. I'm taking this great mushroom product." And I say, "Okay, tell me what brand." They tell me the brand, and I say, "I hate to tell you this, but what you're consuming is mostly grain powder." And I'm at some trade shows, like I'm going to a trade show in a couple of weeks. It's called Paleo FX. And these are people who are paleo. They do not eat grains, period.
Right.
And when I tell them that, they are shocked, absolutely shocked. And I know the process. I know how it works. I've grown mycelium on grain before, because what that's called is, that's actually called mushroom spawn. That's what they use as seed. And the way you can think about this product is, you know what tempeh is, right?
Yep. Fermented soy.
It's tempeh is actually a fungal mycelium grown on cooked soybeans.
Yummy.
Yeah, well, it is. Tempeh is a great food, but
I love it.
That's what people are growing in the U.S. They're growing mycelium on grain, and then instead of selling it as a novel food, which is what it is, instead they dry it, they grind it to a powder, and they sell it and label it as mushroom.
Well, that's misleading.
Misleading. I mean,
it's like a grain tempeh burger pulverized in a capsule.
Well, and can you imagine, you're not getting a lot of fungal matter in there. You're not getting the beta glucans. You're not getting the compounds you want.
Right.
And look, can you imagine? I've been in this business. I started Nammex in 1989. I've spoken to people on the phone. They've called me up. I've got cancer. I'm looking for a mushroom product.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if
it's a huge responsibility, right?
Well, I don't want to sell them something that's not the real thing. I mean, these are people that are looking for actual help. They've got a life-threatening illness, and I just think about it, and I just think, this is so unethical. So my research, I put it out there to the industry. I put it out there. People are starting to understand this, and we've done a lot of testing to demonstrate this. But you cannot imagine the number of companies that I've talked to that are selling these products, that have bought it from the people making them, that sell the raw materials to them. And they just look at me like, well, nobody's complaining.
Oh, no. Are you serious?
I'm not. Yes, I'm serious. I can't believe it. Nobody's complaining. And the underlying thing is, look, we're making money. Nobody's complaining. Why would we change what we're doing, even though I can demonstrate them clearly? I even say to them, look, here's the tests you do to prove that there's mostly starch in there.
Right.
I'll pay for it. Send it out. I'll pay for it. No, they don't care. They really don't care. And the worst part about it is when first of all, the most widely sold products out there are this starchy mycelium on grain. The most popular, widely sold products out there are that. If it's manufactured in the U.S., if it says USA grown, and here's what happens too. Yeah, that's the key. And here's what happens. It's organic. It's kosher. It's made in a USP lab. It's vegan. It's vegetarian. It has every merit badge that you can imagine.
Full of grain.
Full of grain. And for people,
they can't say gluten-free.
Well, they actually can, because they use gluten-free grains.
Oh, Jesus.
Now, is there such a thing? I don't know. Maybe all grains have a certain amount of gluten, but they use gluten-free grains. And what I would tell the people is like, look, just empty out the capsule, taste it, and then tell me if it tastes like mushroom or if it just tastes kind of sweet like grain flour.
Well, that's a nice test.
Well, it is. And you know what we do sometimes at trade shows? We do what's called the reishi challenge.
That sounds fun.
Have you ever actually tasted reishi mushroom? Reishi mushroom is bitter.
Only in a liquid extract. I put it in my coffee.
Well, reishi mushroom is bitter, so that liquid extract should be bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a little bowl of reishi extract, and then we have a little bowl of these myceliated grain products.
In a powder.
In a powder, yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Give people little spoons. They try some of that powder. They go, oh yeah, yeah, it doesn't, it tastes not bad. It's okay. And I'm like, okay, yeah, okay,
We
try
tried the
this.
real thing.
And then they taste that and it literally explodes in their mouth because it's like,
So
oh
bitter.
my God.
We don't have bitter in our diet except for coffee and chocolate.
Well,
Right?
well, that's exactly right. We don't. But that's just one of the clear cut ways that you can do it. There's other,
Love that.
but,
Okay, so the taste challenge and the made in the USA, that's how we know.
absolutely. And if you really want to do one more that I can give people just if they're kind of like interested, well, I have a little bottle of iodine. There's what's called the iodine starch test. You can take that little bottle of iodine, you take the powder, you dump it out of the capsule, you put it in like maybe a quarter of a cup of water. Iodine reacts with starch and turns the whole thing black.
Wow.
It is an amazing
That's pretty
reaction.
dramatic.
They teach this in entry-level chem courses where they have this is a chemical reaction. And so if you take a genuine mushroom product and you put it in that water, you stir it up, you put the iodine drops in it, all you'll see is the color of the iodine. But if there is starch in that product, which is what the grain is, it's mostly starch,
Right.
it will turn black instantly.
Oh, that's a wonderful test.
Oh man,
Very black and white.
yeah, it's very black and white, and it's something that you all can do at home.
I love that. That's so wonderful.
Well, and you know what? Part of what I try to do, because you know what, I believe in mushrooms. I believe they're not only a great food. I believe they're a
Well,
medicinal food. I want people to have the benefits of that. I don't want them to have facsimile products. I want them to really be able to get the benefits.
you have purity in your heart, and that's why you are so committed to this vision. And I would say that the business people that you've been talking to that say they don't care are so full of baloney. Because if, let's just say, they're truly money motivated and they don't care about people's health, you could still say, and for the longevity and sustainability of your business, you start out, yes, sure, the mushrooms are a trend, but when people take the grain filled product and don't experience any health benefits, what does that say about the sustainability of your business?
Well, exactly
Doesn't
right.
make sense.
Well, and you know, look, I know that you didn't go down your path because it was a path to riches. That
No,
was
I'm
not
not
why you did
money
it.
motivated at all.
Well, exactly. Neither did I. But people like yourself, or even what I'm doing, I always say to people, follow your passion.
Right.
The money will come down the line.
It follows you later.
That's right. Don't worry about that. Just follow your passion.
Right. Right. So, what are some of the other kinds of mushrooms that you work with or you're familiar with? I know, we've heard some of the names like lion's mane and chanterelle and reishi and chaga and turkey tail. And, is there sort of like a bullet list or sort of like a
Well,
key facts for beginners that, things we should know?
yeah. You know what I would say? First off, if you're going to pick one mushroom,
Okay.
reishi's the one.
Okay.
Reishi not only has these immunologically active beta glucans, it also has what are called triterpenoids. Triterpenoids are also what make it bitter. And that sets reishi apart from all the others. In China, it's called the mushroom of immortality. It's called the good luck mushroom. It's amazing. So you see it everywhere in their art, in their architecture. Reishi, if you want one mushroom, reishi.
Is it okay that I put it in my coffee every morning?
That's what I do.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah, because I like my coffee bitter. I just like the straight stuff. I mean, it's like coffee, tea, whatever. I want to taste the essence of that. I don't want to sweeten it. I don't want anything else in there.
Yep.
I want the real thing. I want to be able to kind of grok it.
Okay.
So, so reishi, that's the one. If there's any one mushroom, absolutely reishi. Edibles, shiitake, maitake. Getting back to supplements, lion's mane's interesting. It has been used in Asia for brain function. There's an interesting clinical trial that was done in Japan with lion's mane where they gave 30 people 3 grams of just straight lion's mane powder
Okay.
per day for 90 days. They had a control group that didn't get it. They did all these tests with them. At the end of the 30 days, they did have higher cognitive function. After they stopped taking lion's mane, they dropped.
It went down.
Please, buy our lion's mane. You have to take it for the rest of your life.
Oh, no.
Anyway, that was really interesting, and it's one of the few clinical trials out there. So yeah, it does seem like there's something to lion's mane. It has been used for dementia. Oh my God, dementia! Please don't arrive on my doorstep. At least not for another 20 years or something. Then other ones I say that I think are interesting. I think cordyceps. Right now, here's what's really interesting about cordyceps. Cordyceps is a mushroom that traditionally has been wildcrafted in the foothills of Tibet, up at like 10,000, 12,000 feet. And they're on their hands and knees out there because cordyceps is a fungus that attacks a caterpillar while it's hibernating. The caterpillar never revives. And what happens is the spores that are on that caterpillar as it has hibernated, they germinate, they go inside the caterpillar, they consume the complete inside of that caterpillar from top to bottom.
Wild.
And
well, it's alive.
Well, no, it's well, yes, it is alive. It's in hibernation, but it's alive. It's hibernating. It's kind of like at that point it's a zombie and it's dead, obviously. Then that cordyceps mycelium puts up a little tiny fruiting body. And what they call this in Chinese, they have a term for it. They call it winter worm, summer grass. So the little cordyceps that grows up is kind of like a blade of grass, and people literally are on their hands and knees in the pastures, combing through them, looking for these little blades of cordyceps grass, and then they very gently will dig around it and pull this whole thing out.
Wow, well, fascinating.
That is the most expensive herb in the world. They sell it now for $20,000 a dried kilogram.
Whoa.
Is it worth it? No, it's not worth it. But that's supply and demand right now. But here's where I'm going with this is that there's another cordyceps species that they've been using called Cordyceps militaris, and it is a bright orange, beautiful little cordyceps.
That's gorgeous.
And they just brought this into cultivation. So now, and when a new mushroom comes into cultivation, I am like, oh my God.
Party!
Celebration. This is amazing. They just brought cordyceps into cultivation. So now we actually have growers producing that for us so we can offer people not the caterpillar with the cordyceps attached to it. We can offer them this 100% cordyceps mushroom, this 100% fruiting body to our customers now. And cordyceps, it's got a wonderful flavor, real mushroomy flavor, believe it or not. And so it's delicious. And it's something that they use in traditional Chinese medicine for neurasthenia. So people who are weak, they're coming out of an illness, they're weak, they don't have a lot of energy, for fatigue. So this is something that I think people should really look at too. This is something that would be really cool. And I'm going to send you a photo of cordyceps that I had when I was in China last trip. This is it. They sell it as food in the markets. So you can buy fresh cordyceps.
Yum.
And they served me a plate of this, and it's like, it looks like hundreds of little orange worms. But it was delicious. Oh my God, it was delicious. And I've just taken them off the beds where they're growing them, and I've just taken them, grabbed them, and eaten them fresh.
Wow.
And was like, oh my goodness, this has got such a great mushroomy flavor. And when they're cooked up in this plate, it was like, oh my God, this is so delicious. I'm just going to keep going on this.
Wow.
So yeah, cordyceps. It's a
That
real
sounds
interesting
amazing.
mushroom, really a great mushroom. And there's others out there that, chaga's getting a lot of play. Chaga's really interesting. I tell people, I mean, we sell it as a powdered extract form, but some companies actually sell it the actual chunks. Man, I tell people just go out and buy the chunks. The
Grind it
chunks
up.
are, yes, and make your own tea out of it. It's there. It's not that expensive. Or if you find it in the woods, there's even reishi species that you can find in the woods. I'm like, yes, go out there, find it,
Is
make your own tea, because that's how they do it. They make tea out of these things because you can't eat them.
is chaga sort of like a mini parasite on a tree?
Chaga is actually, and
So
this is the, go
I
ahead.
think there's some growing outside. Is it possible? Is it
In
okay? So
Arizona,
in
on your
Arizona,
cactus.
however, outside of my bedroom, there is a
Okay.
ficus tree that
Yeah.
typically would only grow, its like lifespan and its growth should only be about 3 feet high.
Okay.
But because a special gardener tended to it over all these
Yeah.
years, it's about 2 stories tall.
Wow.
And I have no idea if it's a chaga or something else, but there is a huge, like 3 or 4 inch thing that's been growing off the side of the tree. And I just kind of wondered what that might be. And I
It could
wondered if,
very well be a fungus. In fact, take a photo of it and send me a picture of it. I can give you sort of a quick idea
fun.
of what I think it might be. And you know what? Here's what's interesting is that, like on my property here, I have trees that are growing these polypores, these bracket fungi.
Hmm.
They're part of the ecosystem.
Right,
They
right,
they what happens is especially if a tree gets something hits it, it gets a cut.
right.
These things move in
Like a
and they
scar.
start to grow. This is just part of the natural cycle. They
Right.
say that in a birch forest, 20% of the forest is infected by chaga. So anybody who says, "Oh yeah, chaga, you don't, it's threatened, it's this, it's that," it's not. This is part of it. You can take that chaga off; it will actually grow back in that same location. Chaga is a canker. It's just the manifestation of the fact that this tree is fully infected. It's a standing dead tree. It's
Hmm.
not going to live as long as the healthy trees. That's nature.
Sure.
That's how it works. Like I say, I've got these trees on my property here, and sometimes all of a sudden it will just break in half and fall over because inside of it, this fungal mycelium has been consuming it, and at some point, it can no longer. It's no
Right.
longer stable, and it just falls over. You know what? And some of these what I would call even dead standing, they've got these bracket fungi growing off them. That's how it works in a forest. Everybody is there cooperating. We're
Right.
all eating each other, you know. I mean, think about it. We're just all eating each other.
That's true. I mean, eventually we'll die and some things will eat us
That's
up too.
that's right. I
Well,
mean,
we're being consumed every day by bacteria, right?
well, exactly. They're feeding on us. We're a host.
So I had a curiosity about extracts and when is it appropriate to use the powder and when is it appropriate to use the liquid extract? Does it matter?
Well, you know what? I guess what I would say is that it really depends on who's making your liquid extracts because, and just like who's making your powder. I mean,
Sure, sure.
there's so many products where, and with liquids, it's fairly easy to end up selling a lot of alcohol or a lot of fluid with not a lot of the herb in there. So
Right.
it's like getting back to what companies have you heard that have high quality products, and then you can
Right.
kind of and a liquid extract. I mean, I think it's and I don't know a lot about. I've not worked with companies that are making them. Although for example, all of our extracts when we make them, they are made in water. We're cooking the mushrooms in the water. We're concentrating it down to a viscous fluid, a syrup, let's say, in
Mushroom syrup.
our primary, yeah, mushroom syrup, exactly, shiitake syrup. They actually have shiitake syrup. They even have shiitake wine in China.
Oh my God, that
I
sounds so
know.
good.
Shiitake syrup actually would be really interesting. I'm going to have to look for some next time I go.
Yum.
And then what we do is we take, because we do this extraction with the powder of the mushroom. We take that powder, the fluid, we send it to a spray dryer. Nothing is lost. All the fiber is still there in our initial extracts. It's all there. So what we try to do is we try to keep everything in its natural profile. We're not, a lot of people are out there, oh yeah, extracts, they're building up this, they're building up that, they're throwing away this, they're throwing away that. You know what? That's not true. I mean, there are some extracts where they might want to do that, but normally they'll tell you that no, most extracts are the natural materials in their standard form. If that liquid extract that you're taking is made by a reputable company, if it tastes good, if you've got other people saying, yeah, this is a good company, it does that, then that's fine. That's great. I mean, powder, liquid. I mean, let's face it, powder in capsules. It's classic westernized stuff where it's convenient. And that's what it is. It's just a convenience thing. It's like a lot of stuff. And in China, no, everything in China is like is teas. They're boiling up their herbs. They're drinking the teas. That's how they do it. That's the very common method to take those kind of herbal medicines. And that makes sense. I mean, a tea, a soup. I mean, think of that wonderful soup that we take when we're feeling a little bit down and we make up a shiitake or a chicken soup or whatever. It's like that's really, when you think about it, yeah, fast acting. It's in the liquid. It's been concentrated. It's immediately available to us. Makes sense.
Oh my God, have you had bakute soup in your travels in China? Bakute.
What's it called?
Bakute. It's like
Bakute? No. What?
oh my God, I just had it last night. They come in these, I mean, you've probably seen, many different kinds of these little herbal packets, but there'll be like different packets of Chinese medicines, and some include mushrooms and some don't. And you put them in, you just cook them up in, like you said, like a chicken soup or a pork rib soup. And how brilliant is that to just be eating something every week or a couple of weeks that is full of these superfood rich herbal.
And yes, and let's face it, that's really where we want to be. Is we want to be consuming our foods and knowing that they're nourishing us, not just from proteins and all the rest and vitamins, but the whole range of substances that we need to be healthy.
Is there a question that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you about mushrooms, or anything else that we should know? Anything else that comes to mind?
Not that comes right to mind, but let me do this. I've got something here that, let me see if I've got it, because I've got a little poem that I'd love to read to you.
Oh my gosh, how fun.
Yeah. And this is a ancient Chinese poem.
I love it.
And it is really, I love it. And it's talking about mushrooms, right? And it's like the sage who has found the mushrooms, and it goes, without leaves, without buds, without flowers, yet they form fruit. As a food, as a tonic, as a medicine, the entire creation is precious.
Wow. I love that. Wow. That's so great. I think we should end on that note.
Yeah, I read that and literally it brings tears to my eyes. It really does. It's just like so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's the way I think of it too. It's just.
And so if you were going to share, in wrapping up, if you were going to share your last words of wisdom that come from that place, that where that poem touches you, what would you say to the listeners?
I think I would say just what that last line said, which is the entire creation is precious. And I sometimes will just stop what I'm doing. I'll just empty my mind, and I will just open up to everything around me. And I'll just experience the amazing beauty of what we have here.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us on the Flower Lounge. We sure do appreciate your expertise and your beautiful spirit.
Thank you. It's been great. Yeah, Katie, thank you very much for having me.
Hopefully one of these days, maybe I can get an invitation to a trip to China or meet you over there at some point.
Well, you know what? Actually, that's interesting because we have a lot of our customers that are always asking us, we'd love to come over and visit the farms. And we're definitely planning that. And when we do put it together, it takes a bit of,
for sure,
coordination and all the rest to make something like that happen.
Right.
But I will definitely let you know because it's amazing. Have you been there before?
No, I've been to many other parts of Asia, but not China. The closest I got was Taiwan.
Katie, China is just amazing. Oh my goodness. I mean, some place where culture has been going on for so many thousands of years and you see it everywhere, and there's the landscapes in themselves are beautiful.
Oh, I went through this time period several years back where I became obsessed with not only learning Mandarin, I was studying Mandarin twice a week.
Oh, wow.
Became obsessed with those, like in the traditional Chinese paintings where there's like the blue and green landscapes and the mountain, where the hermits are living.
And the clouds that are.
Yeah. Oh my God. I don't know what it was. I just went through this like phase. I was like, whether it was like past life thing or what, but I just like could spend hours in bookshops poring over all these like traditional Chinese painting books. Finally, this was in the early stages of my business. Finally, I was like, okay, we've got to stop this because it's going to prevent you from growing your business if you're going to be so obsessed with this.
Well, you know what? They have sacred mountains in China, and I've been to two of them. And one of them, well, both of them actually, but one of them in particular, it's probably the most famous of all. It's called Wangshan. It's Yellow Mountain. Mm-hmm. And it is spectacular, and you can walk up, and they have, sometimes the pathway is cut right out of the rock. You can walk up on these rock ledges and look down for 500 feet or 1,000 feet, and as you're walking through, you look back at other sections that you've been, and it looks surreal.
Wow.
Absolutely surreal. And it is one of those places that I look back on as just one of the most special places that I've been to anywhere in the world. And I know why they revere this mountain as a sacred mountain. It was just spectacular. And so if we ever put this together with the trip to China and the mushroom farm trips, we'll do a side trip to Wangshan, because it is amazing. Absolutely amazing. I spent 2 days there walking all through it, and it was just incredible.
Sounds stunning. Well, to keep in touch with Jeff and his future retreats in China to visit the mushroom farm and the sacred mountains, you can find him at nammex.com, and that's NAMMEX.com. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Katie.
And for the listeners, if you are in or anywhere near or want to fly and join us in the Chicago area on June 15th, we're doing another Flower Lounge event. On the 16th, we're doing a flower flash mob in Chicago. So thank you again for listening to the Flower Lounge. Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.